It's that easy. I'm already hooked on the OST here. Never mind, I'm in. Fuck it.
Of the early internet stories, there are few as infamous as the Final Fantasy house. Though the details are unclear to most who remember it, its reputation is still sometimes invoked on forums in reference to terrible housemates or the eccentric potential from online communities, especially fandoms. What's more, it was one of the main channels through which internet users were introduced to the otherkin phenomenon. So what was the Final Fantasy house?
A shithole.
On April 18, 2005, a LiveJournal user under the handle of GenkiCrack made a long, scattered post detailing an experience with specific fans of Final Fantasy VII, a popular and influential story-driven game
Such a good
from
game.
Japan. He introduced it by writing, "These people are dangerous. This is not a joke. This is my experience with them." He began by explaining his place within the fandom. Quote, "Most people watching the journal now probably don't know this, but back in the day, I ran a pretty popular website devoted to the characters Cloud and the very minor character, Zack, from Final Fantasy VII. It was really the only comprehensive one out there about the two, which was why it got such notice. I was used to receiving fan mail or other people's fan art, which I'd put up on the website." Unquote. At the time of his alleged experience, he explained that he was a college freshman
Thanks for 5 gift
and a
subs,
heavy
Dolphin.
drinker.
Appreciate it, man.
In 2002, he was contacted by a person calling herself Hojo, referencing the mad scientist villain from the game, and the two began conversing with each other occasionally over AOL Instant Messenger. Hojo had her own fan site dedicated to her namesake, and following the same pattern, she began calling the writer Zack after his site. At the time, he thought nothing of this. Sometime after, he was introduced to Hojo's wife, who went by Genova, or Jen, after an ancient evil and alien creature from the game. The writer describes their first encounter online. Quote, "Then came a good old bombshell. I was asked if I had any memories of past lives. I do believe in past lives. I think it's a pretty valid cycle given how many cultures believe in it. So I told her no, I didn't, but I did believe in it. I should never, ever have said that. It was like inviting the vampire into my house.
Yeah.
Jen's attack was swift and sure. She began in a flurry explaining things to me, how there are alternate universes. Do you grant me that? Sure, there could be. And in those universes, maybe, just maybe, video games actually happened. I thought it could be plausible, because I like imagining anything's possible.
Yes, of course,
flurry, she tells me that she thinks in a past life,
and in another universe, Mr. Krabs really did overdose on ketamine and die.
You're both country grown, you both have that instinct of dragging off friends who could be left behind. You'd take a bullet for someone, right? You say you don't believe in magic or any of that, and he wanted to be a mercenary. For all of his 5 or 6 lines, you have a similar speech pattern. You even live in a basement like he was locked in one, and you hate it. Addle your brain with freshman idiocy and vodka, and this will suddenly make sense. Sure, maybe I'm not him now, I said, but it was possible.
There's a lot of good scientific points being made, at least.
College, Pennsylvania,
metaphysical,
that winter to
quantum
stay at their
even.
Apartment a week before Christmas. He was met at the bus stop by Hojo, wearing a lab coat, who escorted him back to where they were living. Quote, "When we arrived at the apartment, Jen, who insisted I call her Genova and would often refer to herself as Jenny Nova, came storming up to Hojo and I, screaming in Hojo's face. I have no idea what it was about. She was wearing a purple skirt pulled up around her breasts. It looked like she had just got out of bed, and I was, to say the very least, intimidated. About 3 seconds later, she whirled around.
God, I hope there's a picture
Suddenly,
of her.
The nicest person ever. Whatever she was mad about was out the window. About this time, I started to realize, though, Jen wasn't role-playing.
I want to see the
cult
cult leader.
Jen is what the internet calls a soul bonder, or in other words, batshit loony. She believes she has a lot of people living in her head talking, and when she wants to take on a personality that best fits a situation for her personal gain, she acts one out. I.e., if she wanted to get sympathy, she would raise the pitch of her voice and pretend to be an innocent child." Unquote. Despite these occurrences, the writer's overall experience was positive, and he would frequently return for visits, each time paying $300 for a bus ticket.
Ooh.
Every visit, he would meet someone new, many of them soul bonders themselves. Jen would frequently ask for money to buy food, and the writer would relent, feeling a sense of obligation. She would also attempt to help the writer and others
Good,
grow more
thank you,
attached
Jamal.
to whatever Final Fantasy character she had assigned to them. This was achieved through various means, including pantomimed magical battles and a past life regression involving laying on the floor and listening to music from the game.
Yes.
In one instance, on a trip to the
That'll
college,
take you
she
in it.
and Hojo locked the writer in a soundproof room past the point of panic to help him, quote, remember being Zack. Another time, when meeting someone soul-bonded to the character Eris, Jen attempted to coax them.
Yeah, just lie. Just say, oh, now I
To this
remember.
end, she announced that she was going
Just
to
start
waste
reading
their
like a
food
fucking
with aphrodisiacs,
Wikipedia page on
but whether
Zack.
she actually did so or not, her demands were not realized. As strange as these instances were, however, they were not enough to dissuade the writer when Jen and Hojo proposed that he move in with them. The writer moved into the State College apartment in the summer of 2003 with plans to only stay for the season. Within 3 days, he found a part-time job at a supermarket to help pay for food and rent, and he quit drinking as well.
Nice.
His experience quickly degraded. Quote, I can't even say what came first, chicken or egg, but let's just say that after 1 week, I was getting sick of it. I was the workhorse. I guess because I was Zack, I was therefore the manly man, as opposed to Jen the Cetra Queen or Hojo the frail scientist. Jen quit her babysitting job and refused to look for another one. I was the one who had to carry groceries to and from the house, the one who made the money to feed everyone,
I've not seen that one.
the one who had to fix or move furniture when it needed to be fixed or moved. My computer could rarely get online because Jen was on almost 24/7. The rest of the time she would watch me as I typed, so I could never make a journal entry that read something along the lines of, Jen is abusing me, help me God, I'm tired and I want out of here, unquote. Jen's pattern of surveillance worsened quickly. She would always be listening in on calls, reading his online interactions, and demanding to know wherever he was going to keep track of him. She would frequently wake him up in the middle of the night for sundry magical errands, depriving him of sleep. She demanded he spend
That's
his
so
meager
sweet,
paycheck
though.
on $10
Quick!
steaks for dinner,
Get up,
which made
Zack!
him sick. And
There's
when those
demons and
were
ghosts
last
afoot.
one
Get
night,
your wand.
She and Hojo had him ask for unsold food at the supermarket. Nobody in the apartment would take out the garbage or clean besides the writer, who only washed the dishes, and so the stink festered in the apartment in the hot
Big
Pennsylvania
stink.
summer.
Big
Jen
stink.
only wore a single dress and refused to bathe, opting instead to use scented oil. The writer described the smell in the apartment as rotting flesh and a miasma of filth with Sparkle Sunshine Fairy artificial sugar scent sprayed over it. What's more, Jen and Hojo would beat each other loudly and with increasing frequency behind their bedroom door as the summer continued, each time followed by noisy sex. This pattern of starvation, sleep deprivation, surveillance, and social isolation eroded the writer's will, and he began supporting them blindly. For example, while the writer was staying there, Eris grew tired of Jen, and the two had a falling out. The writer described the aftermath. Quote, apparently Eris called one evening when Hojo and I were at the used bookstore, stealing books, yes, that poor, and said she wanted some of her things back that she had left at the apartment. Jen exploded. She called Hojo's cell phone in tears, screaming she was going to kill herself. I believed it. Hojo called Sid and demanded he go over. Hojo called Eris and screamed at her. I told her off too. We rented a taxi with money we didn't have and raced home. Jen, who had been screaming she had slit her wrists, was sitting in the middle of the floor. Sid was draping damp cloths on her wrists. I woke up for a second and knew this was bullshit. I had a problem with self-injury, so I knew very well the sight of a deep cut and the sight of a light cut. I know well knife
this man went full
Jen
Sherlock
herself,
Holmes, just
horizontally
deducing
on the wrist.
everything.
Maybe it had been with a safety pin or a butter knife.
Can't be deep.
It was not any kind of
2-inch
suicide
blade.
attempt. At the most,
be
it
that
would
light.
sting. But I was still mad at Eris because I was supposed to be. I wrote her nasty emails, I joined them in bashing her, I ignored her when she came to pick up her stuff, even though she obviously wanted to still be friends with me. I regret that now because we never reconciled then. Maybe if I had got a clue and tried to get out with her, things would have turned out different. Unquote. Soon he was left with no money to leave and no confidence to ask for help. Even when he attempted to talk to his father at a payphone, Jen would go hunting for him. Then, when the filth in the apartment grew unbearable, Jen and Hojo asked their landlord if they could move to a smaller, single-room apartment, further increasing their proximity. The writer was the one to move the boxes. Soon after the move, the supermarket cut the writer's job to 1 hour a week, But even so, Hojo took all of them out to buy new things for the apartment,
Oh,
implying
nice.
that she had been hiding money away in order to make the writer pay for things. Here, as they did many other times, they fought publicly. However, there was one person from the circle of friends in town who had consistently helped to stabilize the writer's mental state. A person who went by Sid, also a name from Final Fantasy, though the author describes him as having, quote, 1 foot in reality. He wrote, Sid occasionally would come over. When he did, I was glad because it was someone else. But he was and still does have his dickish moments. Jen would make these the be-all end-all, and Renee would back her up. I began to think he was like that all the time and didn't want to hang out with him when he was gone. Once he came back, they had to restart the process of brainwashing me all over again.
Oh no.
Unquote. It was after one of
Just
these
pretend
visits that the writer finally gathered the will to leave. Inspired after someone had stolen his shoes, he left everything behind in the apartment and walked the streets barefoot. By the end, he had spent a total of 2 months living with Jen and Hojo.
Best 2 months of your life, huh,
For a
Zach?
few days,
Fuck yeah.
Sid helped him gather his things and return to his mother's home in Brooklyn. Besides his own account, the writer spoke of a few others involved with Jen specifically. One account was about someone he referred to as Captain McCool, a sensitive person with whom they sought to fill the vacant spot.
My favorite
that the
Final
writer
Fantasy
had
character,
left.
a big soul
When they asked
bonder,
him
of
to
course,
move in
Captain
with them,
McCool.
he was too nervous to turn them down directly, and so he claimed that he had been
What?
assaulted to avoid it. When they discovered his lie, they, quote, had him stuck in a chair and forced him to watch while they raped each other.
That is
Another
Captain
person, he
not
referred to
cool
as
at
B,
all,
would
actually.
sell her blood to help
Jesus.
fund Jen's lifestyle. At the time he was writing the LiveJournal post, she was still living with them, but stayed in the attic and was forced to remain as quiet as possible. The writer expected some people in the Final Fantasy community to see this, but he couldn't expect the sort of attention it would receive.
Thanks to Tier 1 Gonzo and the resub Larry.
Word spread quickly about the LiveJournal post, and many fans of Final Fantasy, as well as Soul Bonders, commented that they had heard some details about Jen and the group in State College, but hadn't known the extent of their behavior. Others who already knew her found these claims unsurprising. Beyond
Really,
the community,
Davey? They don't
however,
look like
this story
like,
gained interest on
Charles
forums,
Manson or anything?
including 4chan, who treated it with disgust and fascination. It was soon adopted into general knowledge as a way to reference poor living conditions and soul bonders, a subsection of a group known as Otherkin. It was here that the infamous story earned its generally recognized name and misnomer, the Final Fantasy VII House, or often just the Final Fantasy House. Though the rest of the internet would sometimes question its veracity, the writer's account seemed generally accepted within the Final Fantasy community. He began to receive testimony from other people affected by the group, many of them people he had met during his time at the apartment.
Also, for
To
what it's
share their
worth, since maybe
correspondences,
people didn't
he
see that,
created a
apparently the
where
website that he set up
cataloged
that we
the
already learned
accounts of
about
those who approached
has
him
pics of all
alongside
this
his
shit.
own. Due to
I
the
see people in
limited
chat saying it's
archival
fake.
information available, it's difficult to say the rate at which he updated the site with new accounts, but it appears he was receiving them as late as 2006, with each person represented by a pseudonym. Some of these accounts were from people mentioned in the original LiveJournal post, and they helped elucidate the practices of the group and enunciate Jen's and Hojo's behaviors. These accounts suggest an air of amateurishness yet charisma to everything Jen did. For example, one account from someone going by Zarla wrote, quote, "There were also tarot card readings and such while we were there. Jen had the same tarot deck I had as a kid, the Tarot of the Cat People, and she told my fortune using the exact same method outlined in the little booklet that came with the cards. I can't remember anything really specific about the readings, except there was always mention of something coming after me or something, thus the coughing. If I remember right, later we were playing with a Ouija board and that something or someone was again trying to contact us."
Zozo is
These
the
accounts would also
demon of the Ouija
unanimously
boards.
support the
Probably what it
assertions
was.
about Jen from the original writer. One of the oddest entries, however, was an open letter prefaced by the LiveJournal writer. Quote, "The following was taken from the Wayback Machine. It is posted without consent of the original
Dolphin,
author, and I want to make that
Shukasei,
damn
Penguin
clear.
Trading, and the
She
Prime
has
Cat
nothing
P.
to do with it being here, so don't involve her. It is being
Thanks,
backed up
Tyrant.
here
Hard to
due to
explain.
the fact that it contains some current information that I felt should be edited out, like names or references to other people uninvolved. As far as I know, the original author is now happily farming turkeys in Idaho. Don't hassle her." This was written in 2003. The article itself is apparently written by another active member of the soul bonding community.
How
though
big
clearly
was
no
soul
longer
bonding?
associated
Goddamn.
with Jen under the pseudonym Candy Wrapper. The introduction to the letter reads, Genova,
Sleep well,
when I
dog.
became your apprentice, you told me to shut up and not argue with you. Apparently, a sorceress is supposed to be a creature who blindly accepts the opinions of the authorities, even when she firmly believes that they are wrong. From this, I learned that when Jen says something I disagree with, I need to nod and make agreeing sounds anyway. Otherwise, we would have to fight every 2 minutes, and quite frankly, saying what I thought wasn't worth the hassle. I am not, however, your apprentice anymore, and I am free to say what I think. And I will, because it's a relief to say it, even if you aren't reading this. I do not actually
Say it to her face, don't be a coward,
or
and
not.
then spit on
It will
her.
hurt your feelings, and you will care that it happened,
you, Jin.
and I don't. You have been warned. The letter is structured as a list, and the first item reveals the name of Jen. You do not look like any Final Fantasy characters. You look like Jennifer Cornett. End of story.
Voldemort's name!
She shared some of her thoughts on Hojo
dropped her
and her
real
relationship
name!
with Jen. If Renee does not go to class and do her homework, it will be difficult for her to pass those classes. Then she is no
There's
closer
Teresa
to
Lawton.
graduating. Until she graduates, it will be hard for her to get a job that makes more money than she gets now. This is called capitalism, and it's a bitch. No one likes it, but no one has come up with anything that works any better. Renee always has to call off work or skip class to give you attention. She does this because she loves you. Love makes people do irrational and reckless things. This is one of them. That does not make it a good idea. You are wrecking Renee's life. It is wrong to do so, even if you have
No,
her
this is
permission.
people that
A few
believed
other
that they
choice
were
lines read,
soul
"You have
bonded
no
to Final
money
Fantasy
because you keep
characters and moved
spending
into
it
a
on
house
things
together
you
and
want.
abused each other and
Anything
shit
you
everywhere.
want is not automatically a magical item. There may be potential magic in everything, but then there's magic in things you don't bother to look at. Things you can have for free. If something is a magical item, that doesn't mean you must own it. It would be nice if you could.
Well, let's
but
go
you
ahead and back
can't
up. There's no
always
such
do
thing as a
so.
magical
I
item.
had money because I rarely bought
Let's
anything for myself.
just establish
Whenever
that.
I got some money,
At least
I
I've
would
never
save
seen
it.
one.
I am not a money generator, and
But then again, I've
neither
never
are
held,
my
like, some
parents.
crazy
If you want
crystals,
to
of
have
course.
money,
Or
you
gold,
need to
for
not
that
spend
matter.
it. I now do not have money because I spent it on you. Poof, all gone. You still wanted more, but I didn't have any more to give you. I have been using crystals since I was 10 years old. You are wrong when you start with that "you won't use them properly" shit, because I've been using crystals since elementary school. You
Okay.
taught me no magic. The only thing I actually learned from you was to beware of people like you. But among these accounts, there was one that stood out from the others, and if it's to be believed, it showed just how far
No, probably
the
not crystal
manipulation
meth.
of
Probably
Jen's
energy
entourage
crystals, of
could
course.
go.
Shungite, stuff like that. But this was before 5G, so Shungite probably wasn't very popular, and that's more of a rock.
In November of 2005, the LiveJournal writer entered email correspondence with a woman who went by Mela. Mela had apparently known and bonded with Jen in a Utah boarding school, and rediscovered her online through an open letter. Though the quote in the email isn't quite the same, it's highly likely that the letter Mela discovered was the list written by Candy Wrapper. Hoping to reconnect, Mela asked the author of the letter for Jen's information, and sometime after, she visited Jen's residence for 2 weeks. Here, she claims Jen was able to convince her to spend $2,000 on various objects and food by asking only for small amounts at a time. Sometime afterward, likely in 2005, Mela made the decision to begin living with them. Quote, I moved in with $17,000 in my bank account, and soon Jen had drained all of that on necessities, all for the house, many of which went into Jen's room and never came out. Soon I received a check from the investment
I don't know what that
company
means,
for
expunged.
$80,000, and Jen's spending began again in earnest. I tried to get her to stop spending money on frivolous things, but every time I said no or told her she should spend her own money buying things for herself, she threw a fit. All this time, she was telling me how important I was to her special plan, how the world needed us to stick together so we could conquer evil, etc. I wanted
And I think
desperately
they
to
could
feel
have,
special.
too.
I was scared and alone.
I really think
and
they
I
had a
believed
chance.
her. She knew a few magic
world
tricks,
could be
was
saved
very
right
good
now.
at reading people, and
If
could
only
give
their house didn't
relatively
split
accurate
apart.
tarot readings. I fell for her lies, hook, line, and sinker. Unquote. After she moved in,
Thanks,
it
Research
was
Trench.
clear that Hojo's relationship with Jen had deteriorated, and she had been supplanted by a new person named Angel, whom Mela claimed was remarkably violent. Jen was now sleeping exclusively with Angel, though sometimes Hojo would sleep with Angel as well. Hojo was forced to stay extremely silent during the day or risk being berated by Jen. This information strongly suggests that Hojo was the one who was selling blood to fund Jen. Their hygiene was also still abysmal.
Thanks to the recent
Quote,
Muzark and Meredith.
Oh, how Jen smelled. Angel was much worse though. I don't think that girl ever bathed. They just kept adding perfume. And Jen's purple skirt/dress stinked to high heaven. That was until I made her other clothes to wear. Jen, during this time, was apparently made aware of the LiveJournal writer's website as well. At some point, it appears that they moved somewhere new, and it was here that she claimed she was beaten on multiple occasions. Once, during a dispute, one of them grabbed onto Mela's hair and started slamming her head into the floor while Jen and Angel beat her with their fists, then sat on her and attempted to choke her. Finally, she passed out from the head trauma. Jen would later convince her that she had attacked Jen first, then blacked out. Eventually, Mela would tolerate no more, and she kicked them out. Much like their apartment, the house was left a mess, which Mela documented with photographs. They also had stolen numerous objects upon their departure, including board games, fabric, and a set of corsets, though her demand for back payments of rent, quote, in excess of $10K, is suspiciously inexact.
It's not that bad compared to like half the shit I see gamers post on Twitter.
There was no method by which anyone could verify the veracity of any of them, instead leaving only the word of the writers. Alongside this, the author would finally reveal the faces of Jen and Hojo. In the frequently asked questions section, he wrote, "Is this photo Vincent/Jen/Hojo? 90% of the time, no. This was Jen in 1999. She got fatter and dirtier. This was Renee in 2000. She looks the same." In response to
neither one of them's like obese
Jen
or anything.
Hojo began to frantically
sounds like they were mad.
most traces of themselves
they don't look
online,
like cult people at all,
their
though.
names publicly available, nobody could find them. After this, the attention on these stories began to wane. But only a few years after the accounts were posted, the Final Fantasy house would return in a way that nobody expected and, at first, seemed entirely unrelated.
That's like one of the few cult leaders that I would never expect to be one. Half the time, they like cult leaders look like fucking cult leaders.
A LiveJournal user by the name of DragonTigerClaw wrote a post entitled "Insane Housemate Part 1" and published it on Housemate Horror, an open, moderated page where people could share their stories of bad roommates. The opening reads, quote, "I used to live in an awesome situation in SoCal until the housemate from hell moved in. Fortunately, she has left, but the bitterness remains on my
Man, you guys remember
tongue.
when people used to
It is
make
a
fucking
saga that
blog
can
posts
only be
about
told
everything,
in
live
pieces.
journals and all that
Please bear
shit?
with me. In the cut, you
Jesus
will find
Christ.
part 1 of the saga
We have truly
involving the
evolved.
girl who believed she was a video game character." Unquote. Soon, the author would name himself as Pete. The tale was structured in irregularly sized sections, with many of them ending on cliffhangers.
I'm so
explained
glad
that
it's
he was
just tweeting
living with
now.
5 other
Twitter's a
people in
fucking
4-story
cesspool, but at least
house.
it's not reading
He claimed that
thousands
the
of
rent was
fucking
a
blogs and
preposterously
journals.
low $500
They have to cut
a
it down
month,
to a
and
certain
that the
amount of words
landlord,
most of the
Matt,
time.
kept it that way because his chief concern was that he wanted company in the house he had inherited. However, his standards for roommates were high. They all had to have stable income and employment and be at least 25 years old. The woman who was chosen after their screening process was kept anonymous by DragonTigerClaw and was given the placeholder name Sarah, who moved in without much trouble. She claimed to be a 27-year-old computer programmer who already had a job in the area, but when she went back to work after the move, she returned saying she was laid off. When others offered to help her find new work, she consistently delayed accepting it, which made them suspicious. But much more striking was her connection to a particular game. Quote, "In the 3 weeks that followed, Sarah was still unemployed. She spent all her time playing video games in the family room. She would play the same game over and over, some crappy-looking RPG from the 90s. It had an unpronounceable name.
Unpronounceable,
Sarah said
such
she
as
was
Final
bonded to the
Fantasy.
game. She also told us that she changed her name to be that of one of the game characters. Upon further discussion, she explained that she believed she was the
Prime
human
Donut.
incarnation of this character. And
Oh,
that they
this is
shared
the
a
other
soul."
girl. You're right.
Unquote.
Yeah, this is the
Pete
other girl. I
refused to
forgot.
reveal what character she was claiming
I forgot.
to be,
Yes.
however, since it would be
Suikoden.
identifying
Yep, I can't
information.
even pronounce it.
This
This guy's
game
right.
would, in the second update, be revealed to be the Japanese RPG Suikoden, released in
Suikoden.
1995. Soon afterwards, a friend of hers came to visit the house. She also believed herself bonded to a Suikoden character, specifically Sasarai, but since Pete could neither spell nor pronounce it, he simply called her something. After spending a week together playing video games, they picketed a barbecue that the rest of the housemates were having. Though they had been
Sarah
given
and
vegetarian options
something.
to join, they refused on moral
Wow.
grounds, denouncing them for eating meat. After they were aggressively told off, they were asked for a house meeting, which took place in March, to discuss whether or not Sarah would be allowed to stay. Sarah attempted to explain herself. Quote, "Sarah lifted her head and started to talk. She started with,
Oh.
"I am sorry, but you have to understand where I am coming from." She also said, "Lots of people
She pulled a
can't
Rick and Morty.
understand me because I have such a high intellect, it is beyond their grasp. Excuse us for being sane, bitch."
That intellect is too
They
high!
eventually learned that she had used friends' help to get past the screening process. She had never had a job in California, was from the East Coast, and used a friend's address to get a California driver's license while another posed as her boss. Matt allowed her to stay until May 1st, since she had already paid for April. Sarah, however, wasn't willing to leave so easily. By this point, numerous readers had become enraptured, begging for updates to what they had come to call the Sarah saga, and many returned daily in hopes that a new part would be posted by Pete. In response to the pressure from Matt and the rest of the house, Sarah isolated herself in her room, with Sasarai acting as a go-between. She would only leave it in Sasarai's company. However, this didn't last long, as Matt was able to pull a favor from a psychologist friend to get her treatment for free, and he managed to convince Sarah to attend. Soon, she was on medication, and was interacting with the others on a more normal basis. It was during this time that they discovered Sarah's true form of income. Quote, she said, "Plain as can be, I have people offer me donations on my blog so I can spread the news of my religion." Her religion being that she is actually a male video game character from a game that came out in the 90s. What? So there are some morons out there who are giving money to Sarah so she can pretend to be a video game character and teach others how to do this.
That's so weird!
Something said,
it's almost as weird as giving people money for sleeping on stream.
So you don't work either, Tim asked.
That's insanity!
Was ready to explode. No, I get government benefits in the UK. Why? Because I don't like to work. Soon after this, Sarah's boyfriend
Exit Tier 1 honey
to
pie
abandon
and
her
resub honey bean
medication, and the
and
results
Admiral
were
sandwich.
violent. After one of the ruder housemates demanded she start taking the pills again, she began smashing fragile objects, including a window. She would continue to take her pills irregularly, but by this point, interaction between her and the rest of the house fell to a minimum. By the time May 1st came, there was no sign of her moving out, and when Matt attempted to evict her, Sarah called the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, claiming discrimination against her religion and her disabilities. While the state didn't follow through on these threats, they did discover that Matt had never filed the correct paperwork to house tenants, and Matt couldn't evict her until the proper paperwork was filed. But the strangest event would happen that summer. In July, Sarah gathered 12 members of her soul bonding group at the house to perform a ritual, threatening Matt that she would file a discrimination suit against him if he wouldn't let them stay. Though Matt
we got a spider.
Only allowed
Hold on.
them to stay until 10 o'clock that night. One roommate demanded that the soul bonders be ejected, but Matt wanted to gawk at their ritual, and so they stood in the kitchen and ate pizza while watching them. Pete describes the ritual. Quote, Sarah came downstairs, dressed in a white dress. She kept glancing at us. Something stood between her and us so she couldn't see us, I guess, and she began talking. She talked about how this was Betty's awakening, and how Betty was now going to finally realize her potential by harnessing the soul of a video game character.
By a salt gun? That's a pretty good idea.
I started cracking up. The rest of the housemates started cracking up. This was better than any kind of TV you can imagine. See if you can picture all of these nutjobs kneeling around the altar as the video game played its music in the background. Sarah stood over them, preaching this religion, and the right bishop something would occasionally interject something deep from her position. Sarah was really getting upset, so more of her friends made the human wall. We could still hear all the stupid, even after they turned up the volume on that video game. At this point, Matt threatened to call the police since it was nearly 10 o'clock, but when one of the members of Sarah's group threw a punch, the threat was carried out, and the group was forced from the premises.
Yeah, I'm sure that was a very strong punch. This man's soul bonding to a fucking JRPG character. I'm sure he's throwing fucking wood.
Readers grew more suspicious. Before this, many people had been doubting the veracity of the claims made by Pete, but when the other housemates began to write in a similar fashion to him, it made them even more dubious. These disagreements eventually spiraled into arguments whose full scope was not archived before being deleted, but they were apparently severe enough for the moderator of Housemate Horror to write a post regarding them. Also in this post was a surprising and unexpected piece of information. Quote, Tim, Pete, and Carrie, aka the people posting from the account Dragon Tiger Claw about the Sarah saga, may be, as they say they are, different housemates of Sarah. Or they may be the one person doing a little creative writing experiment. Basically, I don't give a crap. The posts have been amusing and entertaining, and anyone who doesn't think so is not being forced to read them, so please do not complain. Farther down, the mod continues. It has been brought to my attention that a post was made by someone who was claiming to know Sarah, and that the posts made by DTC were false and harassing blah blah wah blah. This same person, Jay Eckhart, sent me an email before they made that post, requesting IP address information on the poster of the Sarah stories in order to catch the culprit making these false and harassing posts. I declined, as I do not think giving out personal/identifying information such as IP addresses on members of my community without their permission is really a good thing to do you? Also, I have no proof that this person is really representing Sarah or that the posts made about her are false. I have no proof that they are true either, but until I get proof either way, I think the best thing is to not take any drastic actions. They requested I not tell DTC about them contacting me, and I intended not to, simply because it was the most neutral action to take, but then they made that post and made their intentions public. So I feel fine with telling you all, including DTC, about the email now. But meanwhile, elsewhere on the internet, other people were having their own discussion about the Sarah saga, and they would quickly discover much more than they first expected.
More poop and pee-pee in the house, huh?
On August 19th, 2008, a member of the Something Awful forums named Jabberwock posted a thread
Something
entitled,
Awful, baby!
"You thought furries were bad," which linked to the 11 parts of the Sarah saga that had been posted so far. The responses seemed mostly to reflect amusement, though quite a number of forum members echoed the doubt displayed in the comments of the posts themselves. One user, however, who went by Jägerhunde, had a different response.
Is he tier 1 Hisoka?
Quote, "I haven't read through the journals, I only started the first, but I swear this could be about a girl I knew and even once dated in that really vague, sad high school nerd way. She claimed that she was soul bonded to the Eris character from Final Fantasy VII, that her girlfriend was soul bonded to Sephiroth, and she swore at one point with perfect seriousness that she was carrying Sephiroth's spirit child.
Hold on.
Apparently, she'd conducted an elaborate fantasy life with these characters in her head, and had written pages upon pages of god-awful fanfiction about it. So far as I know, she grew out of it eventually.
The wall's fine.
When I say eventually, I mean like late 20s.
What are you?
Even when I knew her at 16, this kind of
the wall integrity inspector? It's fucking fine.
The fuck away. Oh yeah, the girl in question also changed her name to some bullshit nerd fantasy name she made up, and absolutely refused to ever be addressed by her birth name. After reading through the rest of the entries, Jägerhunde returned the next day with a new post that took the other readers aback. Pretty sure I've got this all sewn up, goons. Allow me to introduce you to Catherine Rain.
So she was the one getting the donations
then. Had been in a small writing club in high school with Catherine, and still knew her Flickr account, her DeviantArt account, and her LiveJournal account. They also discovered the Flickr account of someone cosplaying as Sasarai, who had numerous pictures of both herself and Catherine. One of these images credited her as Catherine Silverberg.
Damn, this guy fucking blew the case wide open.
Family of characters from Suikoden, known for their tactical prowess in war. Other photographs had Catherine in a white dress, something that Sarah had worn in the Sarah saga. But the most telling piece of evidence Jägerhunde discovered was legal paperwork of her name change. By searching for her name in the county archives, he was able to discover her court schedule for when she legally changed her name. Though the accounts of Pete and his housemates were still doubted, the identity of Sarah seemed almost certain. They also were able to track down the website that this soul bonding community was using to proselytize curious internet users. Another person rediscovered the pamphlets that they would hand out at conventions. Part of it reads, "The runes are devoted to preserving the natural order of life. While it can't be denied that their bearers have often experienced great hardship as a result of bearing the runes, we know that this is due to inexperienced bearers with no magical training, suddenly and unexpectedly receiving the rune's gifts. With no knowledge of how to live in harmony with these powerful entities, they can't control the vast forces raging in turmoil inside themselves. But if people were taught to listen to and understand the runes, we could have the healthy, positive relationships with them that we were always meant to have."
Agreed.
The end of the pamphlet encourages readers to contact Bishop Sasarai. After looking through the information on the Final Fantasy house, Jägerhunde made another assertion, that Catherine had also been deeply involved with Jen and Hojo. He believed that she was in fact both Candy Wrapper, the person who had written the list on the website, as well as Eris, the apprentice that Jen had lost.
Shit!
Catherine had also been attending the University of Delaware during the events of the Final Fantasy House, only a 2-hour drive from State College. It appeared that, after these two distanced themselves from one another, Catherine began her own soul-bonding community based on the Suikoden games, gathering followers over the years. Though the evidence linking the two was circumstantial, the specificity of it left little doubt, and this revived interest in the Final Fantasy House enough that new people were again discovering it. On August 22nd, just 2 days after Jägerhunde had posted about Catherine, he made another post saying, quote, "Took a day off, everyone. I don't really have anything more to add, except to mention to everyone that I've become aware that our protagonist is now aware of this thread. Say hi, everyone." Gleefully, the rest of the forum members began to post messages to Catherine, mocking and teasing her, claiming to be soul-bonded to any number of characters or objects. That same day, however, an update was posted to the Final Fantasy House website. Quote, "I updated some stuff to make it slightly more legible. Evidently, housemate Horror's Sarah is not Rain Crystal. This comes to me via the writer of the Sarah saga. If you think he's lying or that I'm lying, that is your own business, but that is what he told me. Rain Crystal's behavior, soul bond nuttiness, getting money for it, etc., is similar enough to Sarah that she is harassing the writer to stop posting his lies about her. As such, I still think she's worth warning people about. I am sorry, but based on my experiences and the experiences of others, soul bonders are dangerous freakos." Unquote. The next day, Jägerhunde had a strongly worded reply. Quote, "This is actually a goddamn lie. Greta is a litigious-loving nut, and it sounds to me like housemate Horror Dude is doing damage control. I don't blame the Final Fantasy VII House author, since he's probably taking it simply on faith that our housemate Horror author is telling the truth.
This is getting crazy!
Anyone who's read this far through the thread should see through this pathetic obfuscation pretty easily."
Yes, elementary, my dear.
Person asking for clarification,
Final Fantasy
replied,
bonding
"It would be irresponsible
souls
for me to
people.
say that Greta and her friends have their collective panties in a wad about the housemate Horror thing and have been pressuring the author to recant, so I won't. I'd like to add that it's possible that the housemate Horror author is a very elaborate troll, but even if he is, this is clearly someone who knows Greta, if it's her, of course, and while I'm willing to entertain the idea that some of the particulars might be fabricated, the fact that anybody, you know, like maybe Greta, has possibly gotten so defensive about a series of stories, which even use false names, says much about that person."
Thanks to the anonymous
Unquote.
3 gift subs.
Finally,
Appreciate
on
it.
August 24th, in mid-afternoon, all parts of the story were removed from the housemate Horror blog. However, working from Google Cache, the members of the forum were able to piece together all of the parts that had been written by Dragon Tiger Claw and archive it on the forum, though it also had been saved on the Wayback Machine. That same day, the original Final Fantasy House author posted an update to his website. Quote, "Well, what do you know? When something awful found Catherine Rain, things really heated up. The original writer of the Sarah saga got regular harassment until he took the story down. Considering the mind-numbing level of consistent details between Catherine's data and the data on Sarah, I'm going to agree with the goons. The OP was just doing damage control. It's obviously her. The current theory is, in one last-ditch effort to avoid more court battles with her, he deleted all the posts. Well, Greta, you stepped in it. You took away my train wreck that I was reading to defend your crazy cult. If he was writing fiction or not, you took away the fun. Thanks to something awful, we'll have lots of nice photos and links all here about you in just a little while."
Damn, Zach!
This last update remains on the website to this day, and a link to the Sarah Saga thread on Something Awful is provided farther down the page. Now, the Final Fantasy House's website and the Sarah Saga remain as a warning about fandoms taking to their extreme, but they also serve as an example of how the online space collapses the distances between people, so that even old friends with no more existing ties can discover or stumble across one another, with wildly unpredictable effects.
God damn. There was so much to this fucking story. Holy shit.